Let's jump right into this explainer, because we are going back over 500 years to unpack one of history's most bizarre, terrifying, and honestly unbelievable mysteries. Imagine an event where hundreds of people are hopelessly trapped in a deadly, unbreakable rhythm. And no, this isn't some old folklore or an exaggerated myth. It's a meticulously documented historical event, one that actually still has modern scientists and historians fiercely debating to this very day. Our story actually starts with just a single step. It's mid-July 1518. A woman, known to history as Frau Trophäa, steps out of her half-timbered house, right into a narrow, cobbled street, and she just begins to dance. There's no music playing, there's no local festival, there is seemingly no reason at all for this sudden outburst, but she keeps at it. She dances continuously for nearly a week, only pausing for these brief, exhausted moments of sleep before her body just forces her right back into this frantic motion. Now, it's crucial to understand where this is happening. This bizarre outbreak didn't just occur in some tiny, isolated village in the middle of nowhere. It happened right in the bustling trading city of Strasbourg. This drops us directly into the heart of the 16th century Holy Roman Empire, right in modern-day France. Because it was such a major hub, Frau Trophäa's highly public solo performance absolutely did not go unnoticed. People were definitely watching. And what started as just one woman's strange behavior escalated terrifyingly fast. Within a few days of her very first steps, her husband actually joined in. By the end of July, 34 other locals were dancing right alongside them. As we move into August, this outbreak hits its absolute peak. It completely transforms from a weird neighborhood oddity into a massive, uncontrollable epidemic that practically paralyzed the entire city. The sheer scale of what was happening here is just staggering. Historical records, like city council notes and cathedral sermons, estimate that anywhere from 50 to 400 people were ultimately afflicted by this. And yeah, while the exact numbers definitely vary depending on which historical source you look at, even the absolute lowest estimates tell us that dozens and dozens of citizens were helplessly caught in this frantic, involuntary motion, totally terrified and completely unable to stop themselves. We really need to clear something up. This was absolutely no joyful celebration. When we hear the phrase dancing plague, it's super easy to picture a wild medieval party, right? But the reality was horrifying. The afflicted were trapped in an agonizing, sweaty trance. Observers at the time noted their eyes were totally vacant, just expressionless. Their arms were thrashing violently. They literally danced to the point of severe exhaustion, to the point where their swollen feet were literally bleeding into their shoes. And worst of all, they were crying out in fear, begging the bystanders to help them stop. So put yourself in the shoes of the Strasbourg City Council for a second. You're faced with hundreds of your own citizens violently thrashing in the streets, paralyzed by exhaustion but physically unable to stop moving. You've got to ask, what on earth do you do? How does a local government in 1518 even begin to respond to a public health crisis that completely defies all logic? Well, incredibly, the authorities actually managed to make it so much worse. First, the local physicians consulted their traditional medical texts and diagnosed the issue as an imbalance of hot blood that was basically overheating the brain. So, what was their medically prescribed cure for this? More dancing. I'm serious. They believed the victims had to literally dance the illness out of their systems. So the city council cleared out the grain market, they constructed custom wooden stages, and get this, they used taxpayer funds to hire professional musicians and strong dancers just to keep the afflicted moving. As you can probably guess, this disastrous plan backfired spectacularly. Instead of curing the dancers, the pounding drums and blaring horns created this massive, irresistible public spectacle. The hypnotic rhythm drifting through the city squares just ended up drawing even more exhausted, terrified people into the frantic motion. It took a localized medical crisis and transformed it into a grotesque, citywide nightmare. And the physical toll? It was absolutely devastating. Now, while we know for a fact that people collapsed from sheer exhaustion, historians still fiercely debate the actual death toll. Some later accounts and rumors claim that at the absolute peak of the plague, up to 15 people were perishing every single day from heart attacks and strokes. Other modern researchers point out that contemporaneous city records don't explicitly tally the dead, but whether the final number was in the dozens or the hundreds, the tragic underlying reality remains. People literally danced until their bodies completely gave out. Finally realizing that their whole musical cure was a deadly mistake, the desperate city council drastically changed tactics. They completely banned all public dancing and music. They decided this wasn't a medical issue anymore, but a divine punishment. So they sent the afflicted off to a mountaintop shrine dedicated to Saint Vitus. The dancers were given red shoes sprinkled with holy water and made to pray around an altar. And miraculously, over the following weeks, the epidemic finally abated. So the physical dancing finally stopped by September of 1518. But the true mystery? That was just beginning. As modern historical detectives looking back at these incredible primary sources, we are left with the ultimate question. What actually caused this bizarre event? I mean, how do hundreds of people simultaneously lose complete control of their own bodies? Let's weigh the first major scientific theory that almost always gets brought up: food poisoning, specifically poisoning from ergot. This is a toxic fungus that grows on damp rye and actually produces chemicals really closely related to LSD. Makes sense at first glance, right? But there is a massive flaw in this theory. While ergot absolutely does cause hallucinations and severe spasms, it also heavily restricts blood flow, which often leads to gangrene. So the insane physical endurance required for sustained, coordinated dancing for days on end, it just doesn't match up with an ergot overdose. Okay, another really intriguing theory suggests this might have been a heretical cult performing some sort of voluntary ecstatic ritual. But again, the historical record heavily challenges this idea. Eyewitnesses explicitly noted that these people were terrified. They were crying out, begging for intervention, and clearly did not want to be dancing. Plus, the local authorities never treated them like heretics to be interrogated by the Inquisition. They treated them as unwilling victims of a terrible affliction. Which brings us to the leading explanation among modern historians today, most notably championed by researcher John Waller. It's called mass psychogenic illness, or basically stress-induced mass hysteria. This is a highly documented psychological condition where deep, unbearable mental trauma actually translates into very real, very contagious physical actions. It's a phenomenon where the mind is pushed way past its breaking point, and it essentially forces the body to act out. And when you really look at the context of 1518 Alsace, this theory starts to make perfect sense. The people of Strasbourg weren't just a little stressed out. They were living through what felt like an apocalyptic nightmare. They had just endured decades of severe famines. A scorchingly hot summer in 1516 had completely ruined their harvests, leading to crushing debt and extreme poverty. And to make matters worse, terrifying new diseases like syphilis, which they called the bad pox, and the incredibly lethal English sweat were tearing through the population. Basically, the psychological pressure cooker of this city was just ready to explode. Furthermore, we have to try and view this through a deeply superstitious 16th century lens. Pushed to the absolute brink of starvation and surrounded by unexplainable death, the people of Strasbourg truly believed that God had abandoned them. They didn't view these rampant diseases as biological events. They saw them as direct, furious punishments hurled down by angry saints. Which perfectly brings us back to Saint Vitus. You see, in this specific region along the Rhine River, there was a very well-known folk legend that Saint Vitus would punish sinners by cursing them with, you guessed it, a compulsive dancing mania. So when Frau Tropf's mind finally broke under the immense trauma of the famine and disease all around her, her subconscious didn't just pick a random symptom. It acted out the specific, terrifying cultural script that she feared the most. The dancing plague isn't just some quirky piece of historical trivia. It is a profound and, frankly, slightly terrifying demonstration of the astonishing power of the human mind. It shows us exactly how collective despair and heavy cultural expectations can physically manifest into a real-life, contagious nightmare. It proves that even in the darkest depths of madness, and during a total loss of bodily control, human beings still follow the deep-seated scripts written by their own society. But, as we know, history rarely gives us perfect, unquestionable answers, and this debate is still very much alive among scholars today. So I want to leave you with this final thought for our explainer. Looking at all the evidence we've covered, which of these genuinely debated theories do you think truly caused the deadly dancing plague of 1518? Was it the immense pressure of mass psychogenic illness? Was it the hallucinogenic effects of toxic bread? Or is there another piece of the puzzle we are still completely missing? Think it over and keep exploring the incredible mysteries of our past.